Thank you for joining me. This is Linda King from Lionheart K9, bringing you part one of our series on where do good dogs come from. This is going to be a bit of a rocky ride. Everyone has their preconceived notions about what constitutes the right dog, where to acquire that dog from, and why one choice is better than another. No offense, but that's as intimate a personal choice as who will we select as a mate. We all know there are folks not that great at that either, but still, we've moved well past arranged marriages or remaining stuck and unhappy in a loveless marriage, right? There's a lot of ground to cover. Every option has its advantages and disadvantages, and all I'm trying to do here is make people aware of not only the advantages, but the things that might cause bumps in the road on the way to a relatively problem-free dog ownership. There are only a finite number of ways to get a dog. We will use the term acquire here, since I am of the belief that if money changes hands, you bought a dog. And unless you forded a raging river or ran into a burning building, you didn't rescue the dog, you bought it. I'm also a kind to grimace at the term adopt for the same reasons. Lawyers were not involved, but money was. I am an adopted child, so this rankles with me a bit more than it probably ought to. You can buy a dog, you can find a dog, or you can be given a dog. You don't rescue or adopt it, you bought it. All of the resources available are not the same, and some of them are still better than others. Now, before anyone gets all offended, shelters and rescues aren't necessarily bad choices, but you really need to go in with your eyes wide open, since these sources have come under increasing scrutiny for their inappropriate placements of dangerous dogs that seem to have slipped through the no-kill Ponzi scheme into the rich, welcoming arms of ignorance. Yes, I'm pretty harsh on them for a variety of reasons, all of which we will get into when we get to that point in our presentation during part 3. There is a subplot of purebred versus deliberately mixed-bred dogs, also called designer dogs. Centuries ago, these might have been called land races if they were serving a valid purpose, like hunting or herding. We purchase dogs from a variety of sources, and part 1 of this series is dedicated to the deliberate purchase of a dog from a breeder. A breeder technically only means the registered owner of the dam when the litter is bred and whelped, but for this conversation, we're going to substitute the word for producer, the person that created and sold the puppies. Purebred dog producers are still the #1 source for dogs in this country, but that gap is closing rapidly with the explosion of designer breeds being produced in record numbers. Designer dogs have become a prolific cottage industry. They are included here in part 1 because they are deliberately produced. The capitalizing on naivete from the consumer enables the exploitation of these designer dogs being produced exponentially. The false sense of their superiority tempts the misguided consumer into making a purchase for a pet that can be just as inferior health-wise as each of the combined pure breeds it has been bred from. Their novelty is another factor, even though many coat colors are anomalies that accompany a variety of debilitating health issues, like the Merle factor in Aussies. Purebred dogs still allow for a predictability that you cannot pinpoint in a designer cross, regardless of how deliberate the selection of breeding pairs is. Purebred dog producers run the gamut of stiff-necked demigods that look down their noses at anyone that hasn't won a Best in Show at Westminster. They attempt to make buyers sign impossible contracts that are wholly unenforceable, only to make themselves look and feel superior to the folks that still think AKC registered actually means something. It doesn't. Look for the individual that supports your interest with additional information about their breed, encouragement to get involved in breed-specific activities, and stand by their contracts to replace or refund for dogs found to have developed genetic or congenital disorders, whether they are discussed in the contract or not. The internet is not your friend in your search for the right dog for you. People that breed dogs have a commodity to sell. They're going to make it look like dogs they produce are easy to care for, easy to train, easy to groom, and require no more care than the regular feeding and a warm place to sleep. People that breed dogs want to sell you a dog. They will say anything to get you to open your wallet. People that care about dogs will encourage you to do research and really nail down those qualities that attracted you to that breed. People that care about the dogs they produce want to be sure their product ends up in the correct home and forever. They will make sure you are aware of the health risks. They will make sure you understand dietary requirements, grooming needs, and the issues with growth and development you will encounter from puppyhood into adulthood. Those breeders do exist. They are becoming increasingly rare, but they're out there. They will not only post on their websites that their dogs are health tested, but they will show the results of those tests, or they will permit you access to those results. Verifiable. It's one thing to generally state that health testing is done. Anyone can say that. Look for the folks willing to prove it. Testing is important. It may not assure everything, but they do show what has been screened against. The producers of the deliberately mixed designer dogs would do well to practice the same. There are some that do. Look for them because they really do care about the dogs they produce. I really have no problem with deliberate crosses. After all, every dog recognized as a purebred today was once an amalgam of different breeds at one time. My issue is the indefensible producing as a cash crop, like farm fresh eggs and roadside vegetables. Dogs are living things. They require more thought than what color they are likely to be and how big or small they get. Health and temperament go hand in hand. The producer of your dog should be able to not only explain what good temperament is for that breed, but demonstrate it with at least the dam of that litter. With the advent of AI and chilled extended semen, the better producers generally use top sires from all across the world. The dam isn't only 50% of the genetic contribution, but she is 1,000% of the nurturing environment those pups experience during early infancy. Better producers aren't going to allow total strangers to traipse all over their property to see the condition the pups are being raised in either. So nix that fantasy right out of your head. The risk of introducing pathogens is historically high, with mutations of more resistant strains of parvo, distemper, influenza, and kennel cough expanding into new territories. Trust me, when you get an opportunity to see these pups, there are surefire ways to determine if your prospect was born into a careful, deliberately conscientious home, or whether the environment you see the pup in is a storefront for a fantasy to sell a nurturing environment when in fact the pups were whelped in rabbit hutches behind the barn in the back, or on the neighboring property where prying eyes can't see what really goes on. I live not far from one of the largest puppy mill areas in the country. I'm not exaggerating when I say these things occur. Being able to see at least the dam is one of the signals. Being able to see the entire litter interact, even if other members have already been spoken for, is another. If you're being shown only one puppy at a time, there's generally a reason why, unless it was born a singleton. These things happen, but you really need to divorce your emotions from your logic and walk away from any scenario where you feel like you're not getting all the facts and that information is being withheld from you. That lone puppy may be fine, but there's a reason he wasn't selected by others if there were more puppies in the litter. And don't be deceived by the producer's claim that they were holding that one back for themselves. Trust me, if that were true, you would have never seen that pick puppy. Circumstances might change, but performance dog breeders rarely sell their very best. And I can assure you, unless you are a top performance prospect home, that pup will be going somewhere the producer can assure the pup will be campaigned. Producers of designer breeds can field no such claims since there is no performance event specific to doodles or long-haired Merle Frenchies that I'm aware of. If the puppy smells like a dirty hamster cage, there's a surefire signal to not walk but run from that producer. That is not the dog for you. Does this producer participate in performance events? Is there proof of that? Do they have videos, still images, trophies, ribbons, anything? People that do things with their dogs are proud as hell of their dog's accomplishments. You should be able to see evidence. Even designer dog producers can show their dogs in performance events. Obedience trials are available to mixed bred dogs without them having to be altered. I believe the UKC allows for intact animals, and there's nothing preventing these folks from starting their own performance registry. All you need is a computer and maybe an Excel spreadsheet to tabulate dogs that have accrued points in other systems. I know, it smells a lot like work, but whatever. I don't consider agility or rally to have the gravitas to be used as screening for breeding selection, but either still require the dog to be somewhat trained, have enough soundness to be able to perform at speed over obstacles in the higher levels, and in the absence of the availability of more rigid criterion, are moderately useful for dogs without provenance. Let's face it, most dogs are destined for pet homes. Pet homes usually have children, occasional to frequent guests, busy households, etc. Your primary concern about the dog you bring home is not only will it live relatively problem-free health-wise, but is its temperament suitable to the home you're planning on providing? Temperament should be the #1 delineating factor in dog selection. A failure of good temperament is a big reason dogs are rehomed or euthanized. Training matters, but you must have the right raw material to begin with. And this is where things get sort of hinky and where I may lose a lot of you. So stay tuned for part 2.